Yeah, so basically just getting up here to kind of talk through, a lot of you guys might be in your industry careers right now, and your kids are at a very young age, just basically enjoying Legos and building a lot of fun engineering things, and that was me not too long ago. So the point of this is to kind of bridge the gap between where you all are now and where I remember being, and how that kind of worked through high school, through college, and then ultimately right now, your first job out. So the first thing I want to say is that keep doing what you're doing. Like the fact that you guys get home, you play with Legos, you take things apart, you put them back together, and you're just like exploring and building, that never stops. What happens is that like you get more tools and more ability to engineer things to a higher standard or more robust or can do more impressive things, but it's the same process. And the two questions, or two things I want to bring up here is one, keep doing what you're doing. Two, parents, make sure that you allow them to do that. Because I remember that when I was a kid, anything that got broken in my house, I would question. It was going into my corner, I was going to take it apart, I'd use those wires, I'd use those batteries, I'd use those motors, and that's what allowed me to do everything that I want and kind of fueled that curiosity. So it's important that you guys are all here today, allowing your kids to build these awesome things, because that's just going to keep going and keep coming. And it's a really special thing, and keep encouraging it. And then to the kids, keep enjoying it. Like, it's really awesome to see everyone here together, these teams. Some people on your teams are probably taking more control. Some people are probably in the background and watching. Both sides of those are important. So if you are the one in control, try to take a step back, let other people bring up ideas, because you're going to be on teams for the rest of your life. And sometimes what you think is the right engineering choice isn't. And the people who are concerned about not wanting to speak up, or maybe you think that this idea isn't that good, always bring up that idea. Because even on my team right now, you show your design to everyone else, you say, look, I think it's great because of X, Y, and Z. What do you guys all think? And then usually when people go to that presentation, they're expecting no one to challenge them because they've done all the work. But all you need is one person in that crowd to be like, I'm concerned about this, or I think you didn't think about this, and that's awesome. Because then you get a collective working together. The group is much smarter than the individual. So every single one of you is incredibly important to your teams, and you basically just keep going through and doing that experience. So I basically can kind of open this up to anyone who has any questions about what, if you wanted to, like what things I think are fun and useful, where you could go, what that could take you to do. But yeah, so any questions that kids mainly, but also parents too, you have, I'm happy to kind of answer any questions and kind of talk through some other experiences that I've had, or waiting for the judges to do their thing. So I already see one in the back. Go ahead.
What type of engineer are you?
I'm a mechanical engineer. So right now I'm working on product design. So that's all of the mechanical hardware that goes inside of a watch. So I'm on the watch team. Yes.
I'm studying for all of this, right? How do you feel like that?
How do I feel? The question is, sorry for everyone in here, how do I feel about what I'm doing right now? Yeah, so I think that a lot of people worry, especially when you're around a lot of other peers. I went to Harvard, not historically a very engineering-focused school. Everyone else around you is doing other things. They're going into like finance, or they're going into being a doctor or a lawyer. There's so many other things that you could do. And why I love what I do is I love looking at a problem and like saying like, oh look, I need to move a ball from here to here. There are a million ways you can move a problem, and the fact that I get to like draw out in three-dimensional space what that thing looks like, to test it, to build it, like that gets me excited and my creativity going. For me, I don't want to move numbers around on a spreadsheet. I don't want to like be in an argument in front of like a judge. So there's so many different things that you could do. It's all a question about like what gets you excited. And for me, it's having someone say, this thing doesn't work, and I get to sit down and be like, how can I make this work? That's what gets me excited. Yes?
How does it feel studying in like the world's best college?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's all up for interpretation. So I think that the coolest thing about universities as a whole is the people that surround you, right? You are like being in an environment where you can question anything, and anything that you want to find out more about, you can find out more about. So the most fun thing would be you sit down with a meal, and you ask someone next to you like, hey, what did you do yesterday? And you can have an experience that you never thought you would. This person is a, professional ballerina, and she traveled all across the world for 5 years, and now she's sitting next to me. And I think that that's not exclusive to any one university or another, but the key thing is understanding that there's so many people out there that don't come from where you came from, and just being like, just hearing their story changes your perspective. It makes you a better engineer because it makes you think about problems you wouldn't otherwise think of. And also just makes you like a more engaging person. Everyone loves when people ask them questions about themselves. So when you're sitting around with other people have cool stories. Ask them how they got there, what they're doing, and I think you're going to be pretty surprised that other people do a lot of cool things too. Yes?
So what is it like to shift from using engineering in a studying-based environment to in the field?
Yeah, really good question. So, one is when you're a student, oh yes, the question is what is different from when you were a student to when you're in industry? How do you kind of handle that transition? The first one is you don't struggle for resources. When you're an engineer, and especially you're a student, you want to build all these things, and the thing that holds you back usually is, we don't have money for that. And that changes, or at least when you go to a big company, all of a sudden, any experiment you want to run, anything you want to build, any question that you have, that's something that you're allowed to do. I think what's important though is understanding that when you are a student, you should be thinking through all of those choices. And sometimes you have to say, I need to prioritize this. And you think to yourself like, oh, when I get out of here, I will be able to look into all of that. That's not actually ever true. You never have enough resources to look through everything, to try out everything, to make sure everything's perfect. But the whole point of what engineers do fundamentally is you do the best that you can with the data that you have, and you collectively as a team decide this is what we want to do. So that's one element of it. And the second element is, as a student, you spend all semester building out this perfect robot, and then you present, you compete, you succeed. And at the end of the semester, you take that robot and they say, great, and it goes away. And I think that for me, that was a really tough struggle to see all of the work that I put into a robot go away. And I think that that's one of the cool things about being an engineer in industry is that when it goes away, it goes to someone else who will use that product for a very long time, at least if it's designed the way that you wanted it to be. And that's very fulfilling. And I think that that's one of the coolest things that drove me through engineering was knowing that the things that I worked on, the things that I devoted 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day to would actually go to helping people. And I think that's ultimately why people do and devote all of their time to these things. That being said, transitioning back to where you are now, it's important to spend all that time. Like the thing that makes it the most fun is how much fun that you have from doing it. When you tinker and it fails and you try again and you're tinkering and you're like messing around with it, that's what makes you like happy on the day-to-day. That never changes. So I would focus on that right now of what makes you so excited to get back home and tinker and build and modify and improve. And then eventually it's going to transition into having other people appreciate all that hard work that you did. And there is a process to get there, but it's a very fun process once you go through it.
All right, so we have one last question. So we have one last question, then we'll go on to the closing ceremony.
Okay. Yes.
Why did you decide to go to Harvard and not a more engineering-based school?
Yeah, that's a quick one, so I don't have time for one more after that.
I agree.
It's a good question. I think that I valued a lot of the people that were around me. Yes, it's not the best engineering degree, but it was kind of the holistic experience that I was looking for, and it allowed me to have these conversations with other people who were doing humanities, who were wanted to be teachers, and who wanted to do all these other things, and that's what kind of made it the fulfilling experience that I wanted. So I think we have one more, there's one over there. Yes.
What is your main advice for people who are going in the path of engineering?
Okay, so the question was, what is my main advice? Keep on building. Anything, I think this is the awesome thing about being an engineer is you go through your day and you're like, there is something I don't like. There's anything that you don't like, build something to make it better for you. For me, it was like, I don't like when I get up in the morning and I have to walk to my light switch. What did I do? I built a little Arduino to flip the light switch so I wouldn't have to get out of bed. I still appreciate it. Every single time that I used a product that I built in my bedroom, it made me happy. So I think that the awesome part is, as parents, allow your children to do this, allow them to mess with whatever they want. You can always fix it later. And basically just keep asking questions and trying to answer them. Awesome. Thank you.